you ever worked a job so quiet that it feels louder than any city street? That's what the night shift at the Desert Palms Hotel in Nevada feels like. The silence presses on you. It hums in the vents, seeps through the faded carpet, lingers in the empty lounge. And the strange thing is, it never really feels empty. Not the way a hotel should at 3 in the morning. I took the job because I needed the money. Plain and simple. Divorce will do that to you. I'd lost the house, half my savings, and most of my pride. And the Desert Palms offered me steady work and a free room on the top floor. The pay was lousy, but I told myself, it's just a hotel. Just checking guests in and out. How bad could it be? The first time I saw the place, I thought it looked tired. Not haunted, not cursed, just tired. Its neon sign buzzed like an insect in the desert heat. Letters flickering between hotel and hot L. The lobby smelled faintly of mildew and cheap lemon cleaner. Like someone had tried to scrub decades off the walls and failed. The front desk was a chipped wooden counter with a brass bell that looked older than me. And yet, something about it made me hesitate before stepping inside. As if I was walking into someone's memory instead of a building. My manager, a wiry man named Carl, handed me the keys and gave the rundown. Most nights, nothing happens. You'll sit here, answer the phone, and make sure no one's causing trouble. We don't get many new guests. Folks usually stay long term. Just keep the peace long term. That stuck with me. Hotels are supposed to be temporary. A night or two, maybe a week at most. Who stays at a desert roadside hotel long term? I asked Carl, but he just gave me this look, like he was about to say something, and thought better of it. "You'll see," was all he muttered before heading out. That first night, I sat behind the desk with a stack of old magazines and a thermos of coffee. The clock ticked painfully slow, and the desert outside seemed to hold its breath. Around midnight, I decided to take a walk through the halls, just to stretch my legs. The hotel had 4 floors, maybe 60 rooms in total. But the corridors felt longer than they should have been. You ever walked somewhere and felt like the hallway was stretching with you? Like no matter how many steps you took, the exit was just out of reach. That's how it felt. The carpets were patterned in dull reds and browns, the wallpaper peeling in places, and the lights flickered overhead with a low, buzzing hum. I passed a door on the second floor and thought I heard a TV murmuring inside. Nothing strange about that, except the Desert Palms hadn't had working cable in years. At least that's what Carl told me the next morning. When I stopped outside room 209, I noticed something else. The doorknob was cold. Not just cool to the touch, but freezing, like metal left in the snow. My hand jerked back before I could even try to turn it. And yet, a moment later, I swore I heard movement inside. A slow, dragging step, as though someone had gotten up from bed. I backed away and told myself it was nothing. Old plumbing, thin walls, my imagination. I didn't open that door. By 3 a.m., I was back at the desk, sipping lukewarm coffee and telling myself the Desert Palms was just another crappy roadside hotel. But then I noticed the guest log. It wasn't on the desk when I started my shift, but around 2:45, it was just there. A thick, leather-bound book with yellowed pages and handwriting so neat. It looked inhuman. I flipped through it out of boredom, expecting recent check-ins and signatures. What I found instead made my skin crawl. The entries went back decades. Not years, decades. 1972, 1986, 1994. Each entry listed a name, a room number, and the length of stay. Only none of them had a checkout date. Every line just ended with "about," as if the stay was still ongoing. And here's the part that froze my blood. Some of the names matched the tags on the mailbox slots behind the desk. I'd seen them earlier when Carl showed me the ropes. Guests still receiving mail. Guests who, according to the book, had checked in 40, 50 years ago. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept rereading the log until the letters blurred, and by sunrise, I'd convinced myself it was some kind of joke. A gimmick to make the hotel seem quirky. Old guest names recycled for atmosphere. That had to be it. But if that was true, why did I see one of them the next night? It was just past midnight when I heard footsteps in the lobby. A tall man in a grey suit stood at the counter, hat in hand, smiling politely. His suit was spotless, but out of style. Something from the 50s or 60s. He asked for a fresh towel, and his voice was smooth, steady, almost rehearsed. I handed him one, and when he took it, his hand was icy, just like the doorknob of room 209. "Thank you," he said, before walking upstairs without another word. The next morning, I checked the log. His name was there, clear as day. Edward H. Lawson, room 209. Check-in, March 12th, 1964. No checkout date. And here's what unsettled me the most. When I mentioned him to Carl, my manager didn't even blink. He just sighed, rubbed his eyes and muttered, "Yeah, You'll get used to it. I didn't get used to it. I don't think anyone could. Because the longer I stayed, the more I realized something about the desert palms. The guests didn't leave. They walked the halls at night, polite as ever, but trapped, repeating small requests like broken records in human skin. And sooner or later, I started to wonder what I'd already checked in to. You ever had that feeling where you wake up in a place and for a second you can't tell if you're dreaming? That's what my second week at the Desert Palms felt like. The nights blurred together. My shift would start at 11, end at 7, and between those hours, I never knew if I was standing at the desk, walking the halls, or drifting in and out of something I couldn't quite name. The guests were always polite. That's the thing that got to me. They didn't lurch or groan or do anything you'd expect from a ghost story. They acted normal. So normal it made the hair on my arms stand up. A man in suspenders would come down to ask if the bar was still open. A woman in a floral dress knocked to see if I had extra soap. Their voices were steady, practiced, like lines from a script they'd been reciting for decades. And every time when they walked away, I'd check the logbook. Every time, their names were already written down, years, sometimes decades old. Always with that long dash where the checkout date should be. At first, I thought maybe the hotel was running some elaborate gimmick. Actors hired to spook the staff. But actors go home when the show ends, don't they? These people, they didn't. One night, around 2 in the morning, I decided to follow one of them. A young man with slicked back hair and a leather jacket had asked for matches. He thanked me, turned, and strolled toward the staircase. I waited a beat, then went after him. The stairwell echoed with my footsteps, but his didn't make a sound. When I reached the second floor, the hallway stretched long and dim, the patterned carpet swallowing my steps. I caught a glimpse of him at the far end, near room 212. He slipped inside without turning the knob, as if the door was already waiting for him. I hurried over, my heart thumping. The door was closed tight. I knocked once. Silence. Knocked again. Then I pressed my ear against the wood. You know what I heard? Not one voice. Dozens. Low murmurs layered over each other, like a crowded diner where everyone talks at once. But it was muffled. Far away, as if the room stretched deep beyond the walls. I jerked back, and in that moment, I swear, the door pulsed beneath my hand, like something alive was breathing inside. I didn't wait around. I went back downstairs and sat at the desk until sunrise, staring at the logbook. The young man's name was there, of course. Daniel Pierce. Room 212. Check-in, May 3rd, 1978. No checkout. That morning, I asked Carl again. I didn't care how crazy it sounded. I had to know. Carl, I said. The guests. How long have they been here? Really? He didn't look at me. Just rubbed his temple and muttered, as long as they need to. Oh, as long as they need to, I repeated. That doesn't make sense. Some of them have been here 40, 50 years. Then don't count the years, he snapped, suddenly sharp. His eyes flicked up, and there was something in them I didn't like. Not fear exactly. Resignation. The look of someone who stopped asking questions a long time ago. I didn't press him after that, but I couldn't stop thinking about the voices in room 212. The following night, I tried something different. I left the front desk and wandered the 3rd floor, flashlight in hand. My boots crunched over the old carpet, and I caught a faint smell of dust and something sweeter underneath, like rotting fruit. At first, the hallway was empty. Then, halfway down, I noticed a figure. A woman stood with her back to me, staring at one of the doors. Her hair was pinned up, her dress a pale green that shimmered in the weak light. She didn't move, didn't even flinch when I called out, "Ma'am, do you need help?" I took a step closer, and another. My flashlight beam shook in my hand. She turned, slow as a clock hand. Her face was off. Not monstrous, not mutilated, just blurred, as though someone had wiped a thumb across her features. The eyes were there, the mouth, the nose, but soft-edged, like a painting left in the rain. She opened her mouth to speak, but what came out wasn't words. It was a wet, rasping sound, like breath caught in water. I stumbled back, and in the flicker of my light, she was gone. Just gone. When I told myself I'd imagined it, that maybe I was tired, I made the mistake of looking at the logbook again. Her name was there too. Margaret Willoughby. Room 315. Check-in September 8th, 1959. No checkout. I should have left right then. Packed up, quit, and driven until the desert turned to city lights. But I didn't. Because the truth is, something about the desert palms had already sunk its claws into me. By my 3rd week, sleep had become a stranger. Even off shift, when the desert sun beat through my curtains and the cicadas screamed outside, I'd lie awake in my room on the top floor, listening. Listening for footsteps in the hallway, for the faint knock of knuckles on. A door that wasn't mine, for the low thrum that seemed to seep through the walls. I told myself the guests were just different. That maybe they were squatters the management tolerated. Maybe the hotel was a halfway house in disguise. anything. But the logbook said otherwise, and the logbook never lied. You ever read a name over and over until it feels like the letters are staring back? That's what I did with Edward Lawson's entry. The man in the grey suit. The one from 1964. His name burned in my head like a brand. I started leaving the desk at night. Flashlight in one hand, logbook in the other, wandering the halls, trying to match the names to faces. Some I found. Most I didn't. But the halls never felt empty. One night, around 3 a.m., I noticed something new. The wallpaper in the 4th floor corridor had peeled further than I remembered. A strip hung loose like dead skin, and behind it, I swore I saw something shifting, like shadows swimming against the wall itself. When I leaned closer, holding my breath, I could have sworn I heard breathing. Not mine, not human. Deep, slow, and steady, as if the hallway itself was alive. I yanked the flashlight beam away and kept walking, telling myself it was mold, or maybe pipes. But the sound followed me. Every step I took, the wall exhaled. Every pause, it inhaled. That was the same night I found the woman in the lobby. I'd just come back down the stairs when I saw her. She was sitting in one of the faded lounge chairs near the fireplace that hadn't been lit in years. Her dress was old-fashioned, navy blue with a white collar. Her hair pinned up neat. She looked like she belonged in a black and white photograph, not under the buzzing fluorescent lights of the desert palms. She smiled at me. "Would you sit with me a moment?" Her voice was warm, too warm, like honey poured over ice. I knew I should have said no, but my legs moved anyway. I sat across from her, the cushion groaning under my weight. "You're new," she said, folding her hands in her lap. "We don't often get new faces." I swallowed. My mouth was dry. "How long have you been staying here?" Her smile didn't falter. "Long enough." "Don't you ever want to leave?" I asked before I could stop myself. Something in her eyes flickered then, like a curtain shifting in a draft. "Why would I? This place takes care of us. Don't you feel it?" Her question sank into me, like a hook. And before I could answer, she leaned closer and whispered, "It'll take care of you too." I blinked, and she was gone. The chair across from me sat empty, the fabric still dented where she'd been. I didn't breathe until I was back behind the front desk, staring at the logbook. Her name was there. Of course it was. Lydia Cross. Room 118. Check-in, January 4th, 1961. No checkout. That's when it hit me. These people weren't haunting the hotel. They weren't trapped by it. They belonged to it. And maybe It wanted me next. The following night, I tried to resist the urge to patrol the halls. I told myself I'd sit at the desk until morning, eyes glued to the logbook, hands wrapped around a cup of stale coffee. But around 1 a.m., the phone rang. Old rotary desk phone, beige plastic, the kind that belongs in a museum. The ringer was sharp, metallic, like nails on glass. My hand shook as I picked it up. "Front desk," I said. A voice breathed on the other end. Just breath. Long, ragged, wet. "Hello?" I asked, trying to sound steady. The breath hitched, turned into a whisper. My name, clear as day. I slammed the phone down. My skin crawled, every hair on my arms standing on end. The phone rang again, instantly, shrill and demanding. I didn't answer. Couldn't. When it finally stopped, I realized something worse. The air around me smelled faintly of rot, like fruit left too long in the sun. And I wasn't alone behind the desk anymore. I didn't see them, not directly. But the glass front doors reflected more than just me. Shapes stood behind me in the reflection, blurred and tall, watching. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. That was the first night I truly knew the desert palms wasn't just strange. It was hungry, and it was learning my name. By the start of my 4th week, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The desert palms wasn't just keeping its guests, it was feeding on them. And now it had noticed me. The signs were small at first. The smell of rot clinging to my clothes even after I showered. The constant ringing in my ears, like a faint hum from the walls. And worst of all, the logbook. The longer I stared at its pages, the more the ink seemed to change. At first, it was just my eyes playing tricks, letters twitching, names smearing. But then, one morning, I saw it. My name. Room 209. Check in. The date matched the day I started my job. The checkout line was blank. I slammed the book shut and shoved it into the drawer. But no matter where I hid it, the damn thing always found its way back onto the desk by nightfall, open to that same page. My page. I knew what that meant. Room 209. The one with the freezing doorknob. The one where Edward Lawson, the grey-suited man, had gone. I avoided that hallway for as long as I could. But you can't work a hotel and avoid one. Room forever. And one night the desert palms made sure of it. It started with footsteps. I was at the desk around 2 a.m. when I heard them. Heavy, deliberate, echoing through the stairwell. I told myself it was a guest, maybe one of the long-term tenants, restless in the night. But the steps didn't head for the lobby. They went up and up until they stopped at the second floor. And then came the knock. 3 slow raps. Hollow, wooden, patient. I knew exactly which door they came from. I don't remember standing up, but suddenly I was climbing the stairs, flashlight trembling in my hand. The second floor hallway yawned open, long and dim. Room 209 waited halfway down, its brass number plate gleaming faintly in the flicker of the light above. The doorknob was already frosted white. Cold radiated off it, prickling my skin even from a few feet away. My breath puffed in front of me. In Nevada, in the middle of the desert. I should have turned back. I should have run. But I didn't. Because through that door, I heard voices. Not murmurs this time. Clear words. Come in, they whispered. I raised my hand, God help me, and touched the knob. My skin burned, but I twisted it anyway. The door swung inward on its own, groaning on ancient hinges. And I saw them. The room was crowded, shoulder to shoulder with people. Men in suits, women in dresses, children clutching toys. Some smiled politely, others stared blankly, but all of them were wrong. Their skin was pale, translucent, veins blue beneath the surface. Their eyes glistened like wet glass, too bright, too fixed. They weren't corpses, not exactly, but they weren't alive either. They stood silent, watching me, as if I was the evening's entertainment. And in the center, sitting calmly on the bed, was Edward Lawson. His grey suit was immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted. He smiled that same polite smile I'd seen on my first night. "We've been waiting for you," he said. His voice was steady, rehearsed, like all the others. My throat locked. I couldn't speak. Lawson patted the bed beside him. "You belong here now." I staggered back. My heel caught the threshold, and for a second, I thought I'd fall into them. Into that room where the air was too still, too heavy, like it hadn't been breathed in decades. But then I saw something that made my blood ice over. On the far wall, where a mirror should have hung, there was a window. Not a real one. It didn't look outside. It looked inward. Into the lobby. Into the front desk. And in that warped glass, I saw myself. Sitting behind the counter. Head bowed over the logbook. Eyes glazed like the rest of them. I slammed the door. The voices rose instantly, muffled behind the wood. Dozens of them whispering my name, chanting it, until the sound rattled through my skull. I stumbled down the hall, nearly tripping over the carpet, flashlight beam shaking against the peeling wallpaper. By the time I reached the lobby, the voices stopped. The air warmed. The silence returned, thick and smug, like the hotel was satisfied. But the logbook was waiting on the desk, open to my page, and beneath the blank checkout line, new words had appeared in that impossibly neat handwriting. Soon, after room 209, nothing felt the same. The hotel had shown its teeth. I couldn't deny it anymore. Couldn't pretend this was all in my head. Something in the desert palms wanted me, and it was patient enough to wait until I stopped running. The next night, the phone started again. That rotary monster on the front desk that looked like it belonged in a museum. It rang like a blade scraping glass, sharp enough to cut through bone. I stared at it, knowing what would happen if I picked up, but I couldn't stop myself. My hand lifted the receiver like it had a will of its own. Front desk, I croaked. The breath was back. That same wet rasp. But this time, it wasn't alone. I heard whispers underneath it. A dozen voices, maybe more, speaking over one another, too fast to catch. And then, clear as a bell, one voice rose above the others. Calm, polite. Edward Lawson. You can't keep avoiding us. My stomach dropped. I gripped the receiver so hard it creaked in my hand. What do you want from me? The answer came like a smile pressed against my ear. The same thing we all wanted. Rest. Before I could respond, the line went dead. But the phone didn't stop. It rang again, instantly, and again after that. No matter how many times I ripped the cord from the wall, no matter how far I flung the receiver, it always found its way back onto the desk, whole and waiting. And every call said the same thing, whispered by a new voice each time. Check in. By 3 a.m., my nerves were shot. I staggered away from the desk and into the lounge, desperate to clear my head. That's when I saw him. A boy, no older than 10, sitting cross-legged on the carpet in front of the dead fireplace. He had a toy car in his hands, a little red one. He kept rolling back and forth. For a second, I forgot the fear. He just looked so normal. I crouched down and asked softly, "Hey, kid, you lost?" He didn't answer. Didn't even look at me. Just kept rolling the car. Back and forth, back and forth. When I touched his shoulder, the toy clattered to the floor. The boy's head snapped up, and that's when I saw his face. It wasn't blurred like the woman upstairs. It wasn't pale like the others. It was hollow, empty sockets where I should have been. A mouth stretched too wide, lips cracked and bleeding, opening in a silent scream. I stumbled back, crashing into a chair. But when I looked again, he was gone. Just the toy car left behind, resting upside down on the rug. My hands shook as I picked it up. The paint was chipped, the wheels rusted, but something scratched into the underside made my blood run cold. It was a date, the day I started at the hotel. I left the car on the counter that night, but in the morning it was gone. Carl showed up for his shift, right as the sun crawled over the desert horizon. He took one look at me, pale, sweat-soaked, hands trembling, and sighed. You saw it, didn't you? I wanted to scream at him, demand answers, but all that came out was a whisper. What is this place? Carl rubbed his eyes, his voice low, tired. The Palms doesn't let go. Never has, never will. Guests, staff, doesn't matter. Once it writes your name, you're part of it. That's insane, I spat. It's a building. 4 walls and a roof. That's it! But Carl only looked at me, pity in his eyes. Tell yourself that. See if it saves you. And then he left me there, alone with the ringing phone. I didn't touch it this time. Didn't move. I sat behind the desk, staring at the logbook, and waited for the sun to rise. But I couldn't stop glancing at my page. And the word beneath the blank checkout line. Soon. And the way the ink seemed darker now. Fresher. Like it had been written while I wasn't looking. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. Because when I opened my eyes, it wasn't morning. The desk lamp still burned. The desert outside still drowned in black. And the logbook still sat open in front of me. But the word beneath my name had changed. No longer soon. Now it read, tonight. The breath punched out of me. I shoved the book away, the pages flapping shut. But it didn't matter. The words had sunk into me, carved behind my ribs. Tonight. I tried to stay put. I told myself I'd chain the front doors, hide in the office, wait until sunrise. But the hotel doesn't work like that. It never did. The air thickened, heavy and wet, pressing down on my chest until I had to move. The walls seemed to hum, low and steady, guiding me toward the stairwell like cattle to a chute. I didn't want to go. God help me, I didn't. But my feet carried me up. 2nd floor, 3rd. By the time I reached the 4th, my flashlight flickered and died. And I was left in the buzzing yellow glow of ceiling bulbs. The hallway stretched forever, lined with doors. Each one shut, each one whispering. I don't mean creaking or rattling pipes. I mean whispering. Dozens of voices, low and coaxing, slipping through the cracks in the wood. Some begged, some pleaded, some promised. Let us out. Join us. It's better here. I pressed my palms to my ears and staggered forward. But no matter where I walked, the voices followed. I swear I felt hands brushing against me from beneath the door frames, fingertips trailing over my ankles. I don't know why I chose that door, but I stopped outside room 403. But my hand was already on the knob, cold again, frost biting through my skin. The door swung wide, and what I saw inside, Christ, the room was impossibly large, bigger than the building should have allowed. The walls bent away into blackness, lined with hundreds of doors, stacked high, one on top of another, vanishing into the dark above. And in the center was a figure. Carl. My manager stood barefoot on the stained carpet, his eyes sunken, his skin pale as ash, but his smile was calm, almost relieved. You fought it longer than most, he said softly. I thought maybe you'd last, but it doesn't matter. Nobody checks out. Carl, I whispered, shaking my head. You knew. You've known all along. His smile widened. Of course I knew. I checked in 30 years ago. The words dropped into me like lead. 30 years. And yet Carl looked no older than 50. His voice cracked slightly though, and I saw it. The seams. His skin was stretched too tight, too smooth, like something wearing a suit made of him. You can fight, he said, tilting his head, or you can accept it. The palms always gets what it wants. And then the doors in the walls began to open, one by one, hundreds of them, all creaking outward into the void. Figures poured out, men, women, children, all shapes and sizes. Their faces blank, their bodies too still, their footsteps perfectly synchronized. They filled the room, shoulder to shoulder, until I was pressed against the threshold. Carl extended his hand. Come inside. It's easier if you don't resist. The crowd whispered in perfect unison. Check in, check in, check in. My chest squeezed tight. My vision swam. I slammed the door shut with everything I had, and the whispers cut off instantly. The silence was worse. I stumbled back down the hallway, nearly falling down the stairs, until I reached the lobby. My lungs burned. My heart rattled like a trapped bird. And waiting on the desk, as if it had never moved, was the toy car. The little red one. Its wheels spun slowly, though no hand touched it. I backed away, but the phone rang. I didn't answer. Couldn't. But the ringing didn't stop. It grew louder, sharper, until it filled the whole lobby like a scream. And then, with a crack, the front doors of the hotel locked themselves. The bolt slammed down on its own. I wasn't getting out. Not tonight. The desert palms had chosen me. By the time dawn should have broken, the sky outside the lobby windows was still black. Not dark blue, not grey, black. Like the night had sunk its claws into the desert and refused to let go. I don't know how long I sat there, hunched behind the desk, staring at the locked doors. Hours, maybe. My watch had stopped ticking sometime after 3, the second hand frozen in place. Time doesn't move right in the desert palms. It stretches, bends, loops back on itself until you can't tell whether you're still awake or trapped in someone else's nightmare. And then came the sound that nearly broke me. Footsteps. Not the polite shuffle of the long-term guests. Not the synchronized march of the crowd I'd seen behind Carl. These footsteps were heavy, deliberate, circling the lobby. I couldn't see anyone. The sound just moved from corner to corner, slow and patient. Then came the breathing. Close. Too close. The air thickened with the smell of rot, sweet and sickening. And when I looked at the reflection in the glass doors, I saw it. Not clearly. Never clearly. But enough. A tall shape, broad-shouldered, leaning forward as if pressing its face against mine from behind. Its eyes glowed faintly, wet and white, like drowned lamps in the dark. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. But I felt it lean closer. Close enough that the whisper brushed my ear. You're already ours. My throat closed up. My body screamed to run. But the lobby felt smaller now. The walls pressing inward. I grabbed the logbook, desperate, as if it held some kind of answer. Pages flipped beneath my hands, yellowed sheets rustling, until they stopped on my name again. Only the checkout line wasn't blank anymore. Checkout never. The letters bled into the page, ink spreading like veins, crawling across the paper toward my hands. I dropped the book, but it didn't matter, because when I looked down, the word never had already etched itself across my palm in bruised, purple script. That's when I broke. I bolted. Up the stairs, through the halls, searching for any window, any exit that wasn't locked. Doors slammed as I passed them, rattling on their hinges, voices rising from behind, laughter, whispers, sobs, all layering until it was one long howl of sound. By the time I reached the top floor, I was gasping. My room, 412, was the only door that stood open. I didn't want to go inside, but the hall behind me seethed with whispers, pulling closer. So I stepped through. The room looked normal at first. My bed unmade, coffee cup still on the nightstand, desert dust seeping in through the cracked window. For a second, I thought maybe I'd woken up, that this was all some fever dream. Then I saw the mirror. It hung opposite the bed, a wide rectangle of tarnished glass. But it wasn't reflecting me. Not exactly. In the mirror, I was sitting behind the front desk, logbook open in front of me, head bowed, lips moving. The reflection leaned closer until I could see its mouth, and I realized it was whispering the same word over and over. Stay. I backed away, but the reflection didn't. It kept sitting there, grinning faintly, eyes glassy. And then, slowly, it raised its hand and pointed at me. The window behind me shattered. The wind that rushed in wasn't desert wind. It was cold, wet, carrying the smell of earth and mildew, like air sucked straight from a tomb. My curtains whipped, the lamp toppled, and from the broken glass I heard them, the voices of every guest I'd seen, layered together in a chorus. Check in, stay, never leave. Something in me snapped. I grabbed my duffel bag, stuffed it with whatever I could, cash, keys, flashlight, and ran down the hall, down the stairs, into the lobby. The front doors were still bolted, but I didn't care. I threw my shoulder against the glass, once, twice. On the third hit, it cracked. And then it opened for me. Not outward, inward. The doors yawned wide, like a mouth. And beyond them wasn't the desert. It was the lobby. The same front desk. The same dusty lounge chairs. The same dead fireplace. I was back inside. The hotel had looped itself. I stood there, breath ragged, staring into my own prison. And deep down, I finally understood. The Desert Palms wasn't a building. It wasn't even a place. It was a trap, a stomach. And once you stepped inside, it digested you slow. And now, it was almost finished with me. I don't remember falling. One moment, I was staring at the doubled lobby. My reflection whirled, yawning wide, like some rotten mouth. And the next, I was flat on the carpet, cheek pressed into the mildew, chest heaving like I'd been drowned and dragged back. I tried to crawl toward the desk, toward the phone I knew wouldn't work. but every inch forward felt like pushing through tar. The air was thicker now, clinging to me. The walls hummed with voices, a low vibration crawling through the plaster. And then, just like that, it all stopped. Silence. The kind of silence you don't get in hotels. No buzzing lights. No air conditioning. No creak of pipes or shuffle of late guests. Just void. The only sound left was a ringing. Not in my ears, no. From the bell at the desk. The little brass one meant for guests to tap when they needed service. Ding! I lifted my head. There was someone at the counter. It wasn't Carl. It wasn't any guest I recognized. It was me. He stood there in my uniform, tie loose, sleeves rolled up. His eyes were hollow, sockets smudged black, but the grin stretching across his face was wide, eager, hungry. He tapped the bell again with one finger, slow, deliberate. Ding! And in his other hand, the logbook. It lay open, pages flickering on their own, until they landed on the sheet where my name sat, waiting. He dipped the pen in a little ink pot that hadn't been there before. And as I watched, he dragged the nib across the paper. The words etched themselves. Check out. Tonight. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. My double leaned over the book, grinning wider, and whispered in my voice, my exact voice. Congratulations, you're permanent staff now. The lights above flickered on with a hum, but they weren't hotel lights anymore. They glowed too white, too harsh, like surgical lamps. And when I looked around, the lobby was different, cleaner, sharper. No dust, no decay. Everything gleamed as if it had been freshly scrubbed. And behind me, guests, hundreds of them, standing in neat rows, their faces blank, their clothes out of time. Suits from the 40s, dresses from the 60s, baseball caps from the 80s, all of them silent, all of them staring at me with one hollow, hungry sameness. My double gestured toward me. Our newest attendant, he said. And though his mouth moved, the voice came from everywhere. Walls, ceiling, floorboards. The guests clapped. A soft, echoing applause that wasn't joyful, wasn't human. Just a sound of agreement. And in that moment, I realized the hotel had stopped fighting me. It had won. Because the horror wasn't about being a guest here. Guests never leave, sure. But staff serve forever. The bell rang again. My double was gone. The desk stood waiting. Logbook open, pen resting beside it. My hands moved on their own. I stood, walked, sat behind the counter, just like I had 1,000 times before. My voice, flat, practiced, no longer my own, answered, "Of course. Welcome to the Desert Palms Hotel." The pen scratched. Another name filled the book. And I knew, with a certainty that curdled my stomach, that this is how it goes. Always. The new check-in. The quiet serving. The endless cycle. You don't check out. You get absorbed. That's why I'm telling you this. Because the Desert Palms doesn't advertise anymore. Not the way it used to. It calls people differently. It whispers. Sometimes in your dreams. Sometimes when you're driving through the desert, late at night, bone tired, looking for a vacancy sign that shouldn't be lit anymore. And if you ever see it, that crooked neon glow, buzzing faint in the dark, a promise of a bed and a room key when you need it most, don't stop. Don't even slow down, because once you step inside, you're already in the book. And if you ever hear your name whispered from the dark, don't turn around. Just run.